So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this morning's vodcast. I'm very excited to say this morning we are joined by Victoria Bond, and she is the CEO of Space HR. HR is a subject that I think lots of people probably think they know a lot about and actually don't know very much about, which is why we need to speak to experts like Victoria. So, I understand today we're going to be talking about employee engagement.
That's right, yeah.
So, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. So let me just do a bit of an intro then and a bit about my background and why actually I'm talking to you about employee engagement today. So my background is HR. I was senior HR leader for many years in startups, corporate, etc. And established Space HR, and everything that we do in Space HR is all about employee engagement actually, which is kind of my favourite topic, and it's always been what's kind of set my heart alight, if you see what I mean. So, and I'll kind of dip into a little bit more about what I mean by employee engagement in a minute. But so we at the core of what we do at Space HR, we have a platform that captures anonymous employee feedback, and the work that I then do with organisations is taking that feedback and using it to transform their organisations. So, building up engagement, building up employee performance. Building up retention, and employees often joke at the moment I kind of sell retention, but all of that, it comes down to employee engagement, and culture. So and
I think the fact that you do it anonymously will be a huge factor, because I've worked in recruitment and leaver interviews and anything like that. People don't want to give their opinion because they're afraid of someone almost finding out it was them that said it, when it's actually helping a business. Feedback is how a business grows and how they engage their employees, but you always have that fear factor, don't you? Well, I don't want them to know that I've said something that might be a little bit negative about the workplace. So the fact that this is really good.
Yeah, so there's some evidence that suggests that 3/4 of employees would feel more comfortable giving feedback if it was anonymous. And it isn't, we talk about kind of a feedback culture, so having layers in your organisation. Of course, that open, transparent feedback is really important to the culture as well. But this is about creating psychological safety.
Yes.
For if somebody does want to give that feedback. And actually, there's some fear on both sides that I found. Sometimes I think both parties need to make themselves quite vulnerable in order to go and give feedback. A leader, to go and ask for feedback, they've got to make themselves vulnerable to take that on, and an employee needs to make themselves vulnerable in order to give that feedback. And so that's the work that we do. We help with that, but also making sure that feedback transforms into action when we need it to, and we're being really respectful with the feedback that we get.
Amazing. Right, I can't wait to hear all about it.
Cool. So let me start then with what's employee engagement. So employee engagement, I always think of it as being kind of where employee happiness meets the goals of the organisation. And when those two things come together, that's when we kind of supercharge an organisation. And often employee engagement is like a bank account. So if you imagine it as a bank account, and we can kind of measure the amount that we've got in that bank account, if you like. The amount that we've got in the bank account is really important, because sometimes as employers we need to make a withdrawal from that. So maybe we haven't given the extra bank holiday for the Queen, or maybe we've had to start charging for parking. Don't know. Anyway, totally making it up. But those are withdrawals out of that engagement bank account. But as long and the lower our balance gets, the lower engagement gets, and then we'll see performance drop. We'll start to see people leave the organisation if we get too low, because it isn't a place where people want to spend time. So our job as leaders, as people managers, is to keep putting deposits into that engagement bank account in order to make sure that we've got a healthy balance in there. And we know, like I say, that higher engagement leads to happier and healthier employees. We know that it leads to higher performing teams, lower turnover, higher talent retention, and overall business performance. And there was a piece of research that was done that suggested that businesses with highly engaged teams outperform businesses without by 202%.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's yeah, exactly. And you can kind of see it. So the work that I do, you know, I can see in the data and the stats and the feedback that I get. I can even pinpoint specific teams where I can tell you that we've got a challenge, and it's all there in the employee feedback, which is kind of why I love what we do. I properly geek out over the data. But in this country, we do have an engagement issue. So there was, I read a lot of research. There was another piece of research that suggested they were ranking European countries by levels of engagement. And out of 35 European countries, the UK came 33rd in terms of the engagement of employees in our country. So in the UK, we've got an issue.
Who was top? Do you remember?
No, I don't. I'm really sorry. I've just got this stat that logged in my brain, and then I've forgotten the rest of the article.
That's bad, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And is that just because it's something that's, as a country, we've never thought we've had to embrace before, or is it just? Do you know what I mean? Is that something that's built up over time that we've not been conscious of, or?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. I think it's the culture of the UK in general. I think it's the working hours. I think it's what's expected from employees. I think it's equality and diversity in those organisations that we know that we're still struggling with. I think it's the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's the habits and the culture that we've got around rewards, you know, and I think there's loads of things that go into it. You know, it might even be kind of culture around hybrid remote working, and I mean that kind of in a the other countries maybe are doing better than us.
Yeah,
tons of stuff, I think. Yeah, and there's a stat that always again sticks in my brain that they reckon that only 2 in 10 employees are actively engaged in the workplace. So to think about that, if you've got a team of 10 sat around your table, only 2 of them are like, woo, I'm really excited to be here. And hopefully the others are kind of somewhere in the middle. Hopefully you've not got too many people in that disengaged part who have actively got a foot out the door.
Yeah.
But only 2 in 10 employees, you know, really wanting to be there. That's mega, really. And so, you know, the more that we can do to impact getting that 2 in 10 to 3 in 10 to 4 in 10, that's when we start to beat the odds, and that's when we start to have a high performing business that's outperforming other businesses. Another stat, sorry, I love my stats. So there's 1 in 5 employees that are considering changing jobs in the next 12 months.
Yeah, so I've seen quite a lot on LinkedIn about this silent quitting or quiet quitting, which seems to be I mean, it's obviously always been there, and you know, people then start talking about it and give it a name, but I feel like that's probably going on in quite a lot of workplaces at the moment, where people are very disengaged but know they need a job because they need stability and don't want to move to a new job because it's normally last in, first out, and nobody knows what's going on at the moment. So they're just literally, it's non-transactional. They get up, they go to work, they go home. You know, it's they just need that money, and they're not engaging in the workplace at all, which essentially makes you miserable because that's where you spend most of your time, or the majority of us anyway. Yeah,
exactly. And if you think about, you know, the well-being of those employees, you know, we've got pressure on our well-being and our mental health externally, and then we've got pressure in our mental health and well-being internally, because maybe we've got a ton of what I'd call under-engaged employees who maybe don't want to be there, but they feel trapped in that organisation, because you're exactly right, that's what was happening. So roll the clock back a couple of months, and there was like this mad scramble for talent, and everybody was moving for a higher salary, you know, and talent was just flooding out of the organisations, and it was, you know, the people who were getting the talent were the people who were throwing the most money at it. And we're seeing a real shift in that, like you said. So the more we've talked about cost of living crisis and recessions, etc., the more now the challenge is going to be around under engaged employees who naturally would have moved on and haven't. So yeah, you're right. And you know, that can really quickly translate into profitability. So, you know, like I say, if we know that engagement is directly linked to performance, that then naturally leads into profitability. They reckon that lower engaged organisations have 15% less profitability than high engagement organizations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess probably the last thing that I wanted to talk about really was some solutions.
Yeah.
And, you know, actually, if we know that, if I've kind of done my job in terms of selling you why employee engagement is really important at this point in time, you know, actually, what do we do about it? Well, it isn't all about kind of chucking benefits and salaries, etc., at employees. And in fact, you know, there's some evidence to suggest that if you're paying an employee to stay, if you like, if they've handed in their resignation, you throw some extra cash at them, that it only retains them additionally for a short period of time. Yeah. Actually, what we need is really solid engagement in our organisation. And I kind of break it down into 4 key areas, and I'll kind of talk you through them. So we've got connection, and connection is about this is vision, mission, values in your organisation. So however big or small your organisation is, this is about, do your employees know where you're heading, know why you're heading there, and are they bought into your journey and to your vision as an organisation? And, you know, even if that changes, the employees need to understand where you're heading and the part that they can play. So one of the questions that we'll often ask employees is, do you understand the goals of the organisation and how you can contribute to them? And employees need to be really super clear on that, because otherwise that's where we get misalignment. That's where we get employees going off over there, and it takes us longer to get to our goals. A really big part about connection is two-way communication. So, you know, employees feel like they're well informed, and do employees have a really clear voice in the organisation?
Yeah.
So that's connection. Then we talk about fulfillment. And fulfillment's about feeling personally fulfilled in your role. So things like work-life balance is sitting here, career development, a pride in the organisation. You know, do employees feel like they've got all the training and support they need to succeed, for example? And really kind of making it a fulfilling role and fulfilling careers. So we talk about fulfillment. Then thinking about leadership, which is the third section. Leadership's all about those relationships with your leaders. So are leaders fair? Are they great coaches? You know, do they bring out the best in their teams? Are they creating great team environments? Are they rewarding and recognising their employees? And, you know, again, bringing out the best in their teams. And have we got really great relationships with our leaders in our organisation? And then well-being. So this is about feeling safe and secure and supported in the workplace, both physically and psychologically. So diversity and inclusion might sit in this section for us, for example, because that's about psychological safety in the workplace. And really making an environment where employees want to be there. They feel like it's an employee-led organisation. Their well-being comes first. You know, they're physically safe in the workplace. They're not looking over their shoulder about whether they're going to be made redundant next week, etc. And so these are all the things. I don't know whether there's an opportunity to share anything afterwards, but we're happy to kind of share the engagement model. And you know, it's that. I guess that's kind of how you build up engagement in your organisation, and how and those elements. And like you can hear, kind of not all of that stuff is monetary value. It's not all benefit. It's about creating that incredible environment where employees really thrive.
And do you know what? I think previously maybe we were, as a culture, a lot more money driven, and that was what we thought was, you know, the big driver. And like you said, you know, chuck some more money at them, they won't leave. Now, and I think especially after the pandemic, we have all become, because we had that downtime almost where we were at home, and then all of a sudden things have gone back to crazy again. I know personally, I'm more interested now in work-life balance than I've ever been. Now, that might be my age, but I think we've got a varied age in the office, and I think everybody is more interested in that. Everybody is more interested in that, you know, you can finish half an hour early to go and do something and not feel like, oh my goodness, I've got to make that 30 minutes up, because you'll work harder anyway because you've been given that flexibility. And that's just one example, but I feel now people want to feel more valued as an employee than ever. And that comes down to employee engagement. And that doesn't come down to necessarily time off and extra money. That comes down to team building days. That comes down to being structured, like you've said, sitting down. Everyone knows what the goal is. Everyone knows what they're working towards. Things that don't necessarily have to cost a business money, but can mean that they'll have their employees more engaged. And eventually when that happens, it means their profits go up. And then, yes, they can then start off for those monetary values because they've got more profit coming into the company. But I think it's a case of you need to start small, don't you, and realize who your workforce is and how they work and how you want them to work.
Yeah, exactly. And really getting under the skin of them, understanding the demographics that you've got, what's really important to those employees as an individual. And, once upon a time, we used to kind of do engagement by a whole organisation. It's much more individualised now. It's much more, what do you need as an individual, and how can we deliver a fantastic experience for you so that you feel personally recognised in the organisation, you're more likely to stay.
Perfect. Well, I could, as you could probably tell, talk to you for hours about this. It's a really interesting subject. As Victoria mentioned, if anybody wants to talk to her more about the engagement model, you can find Victoria on the platform, so directorschoice.com. If you go to the HR area, Space HR are there, and I'm sure Victoria would be more than happy to answer any questions that you've got. Hopefully we can do another vodcast soon and explore some more areas of HR, because as I say, I think it's a subject that everybody needs to know about, but they don't know much about. And if you don't know about it, you don't know it, which is the point of these podcasts, helping employees and business owners to know what they need to know, even if they don't realise they need to know it.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. Thank you so much, Victoria. And hopefully we will see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.